History remembers many kings, but very few have burned themselves into legend the way Richard the First of England did. Known forever as Richard the Lionheart, he embodied the ideals of medieval kingship. Fearless in battle, unyielding in loyalty, and driven by a sense of honor that shaped empires. Yet behind the armor and myth was a man shaped by family conflict, political intrigue, rebellion, and a thirst for adventure that carried him from England to the deserts of the Holy Land. This is the gripping tale of the king who lived not for peace but for greatness, a birth into power and conflict. Richard was born on September 8, 1157 in Beaumont Palace, Oxford. His father, King Henry II, was one of the most powerful rulers of Europe. Brilliant, ruthless, and determined to build a vast Angevin empire stretching from Scotland to the Pyrenees. Henry's reforms became the backbone of England's legal system, yet his strength also bred enemies in his court and even among his children. Richard's mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, was no ordinary queen. Heiress to one of Europe's wealthiest duchies, former Queen of France, patron of poets, commander of armies, and a political mastermind in her own right. Eleanor influenced Richard more than anyone else. His culture, his ideals, and his fierce independence came directly from her. But the marriage between Henry and Eleanor was a storm waiting to explode. Their arguments over power and the upbringing of their sons would shape Richard's destiny. A prince not meant to be king. Richard was not born heir to the throne. His older brother, Henry the young king, had already been crowned as heir apparent. Richard's future seemed tied to Aquitaine, the land he inherited from Eleanor. From childhood, he was groomed not as a king of England, but as a duke, a warrior lord expected to rule fiercely and independently. Richard spent much of his early life in southern France. He grew up speaking French and Occitan, composing poetry, training in arms, and learning courtly culture. While he was English by birth, his heart belonged to Aquitaine, and his early loyalties were shaped far from London, a family at war with itself. The Angevin royal family was a battlefield long before Richard ever saw combat. King Henry II tried to divide his lands among his sons while keeping ultimate control in his own hands. His sons, hungry for real power, revolted. In 1173, Richard, just 16, joined his mother and brothers in a rebellion against their father. Despite his youth, he proved a natural commander. In Aquitaine, he led armies, seized castles, and fought with the ferocity that would later define him. Henry II crushed the revolt, imprisoning Eleanor for years. Richard was forgiven but never fully trusted, yet the tension never faded. Over the next decade, Richard fought not only rebels in Aquitaine but also his own brothers, who tried repeatedly to push him aside. When his elder brother Henry died in 1183, Richard suddenly became the future king. Henry II demanded he surrender Aquitaine to his younger brother John, but Richard refused. The family war reignited, pulling in allies and enemies across France. The alliance that changed everything. With conflict spiraling, Richard made a surprising alliance. He joined forces with Philip II of France, the young and ambitious king who was once the stepson of Richard's mother. Together, Richard and Philip challenged Henry II's authority. In 1189, at the Battle of Balans, Richard's forces helped defeat his father's army. Just days later, Henry II died, broken and exhausted. Richard, now the eldest surviving son, inherited the crowns of England, Normandy, and Anjou. From the beginning, it was clear. Richard did not care for sitting on thrones. He wanted a battlefield. The world calls for a crusade. In 1187, the Muslim leader Saladin had recaptured Jerusalem, sending shockwaves through Christian Europe. Kings, nobles, and knights rallied for what became the Third Crusade, determined to reclaim the Holy City. Richard saw his moment. He swore an oath to join the crusade, raised massive funds through taxes and land sales, and emptied nearly everything his father had left behind. For Richard, this wasn't just a religious mission. It was his chance to carve his name into history. In 1190, Richard and Philip II set sail. Storms, rebellions, and a princess in chains. The journey to the Holy Land was far from peaceful. In Sicily, Richard became embroiled in local politics when his sister Joan widow of the late Sicilian king, was imprisoned by the new ruler. Richard attacked Messina, burned parts of the city, forced Joan's release, and extracted concessions before sailing onward. A violent storm scattered his fleet. Richard's treasure ship wrecked on the shores of Cyprus, and its survivors were taken prisoner by the island's tyrant, Isaac Komnenos. Furious, Richard invaded Cyprus, conquered it within days, and claimed the island as his own. There he married Berengaria of Navarre, forming a powerful political alliance. Cyprus would later become crucial for crusader logistics and remain a Christian stronghold for centuries. The Siege of Acre and a king at war. Richard arrived at Acre in June 1191, where crusader forces had been struggling for 2 years to capture the fortified city. Sick with fever yet unwilling to rest, he joined the final assaults and helped force the Muslim garrison to surrender. But victory came with political chaos. Rival crusader leaders Guy of Lusignan and Conrad of Montferrat fought over the crown of Jerusalem. Philip II quarreled with Richard over spoils, territories, and leadership. The French king soon abandoned the crusade altogether, leaving Richard alone at the head of the Christian armies. In one of the most controversial decisions of the crusade, Richard executed 3,000 Muslim prisoners after negotiations with Saladin collapsed. It cemented his reputation as both a fearless warrior and a harsh commander. The Battle of Arsuf. On September 7, 1191, near the coastal forests of Arsuf, Saladin's forces attacked Richard's marching army. The battle became one of Richard's greatest victories. Saladin's troops repeatedly charged, trying to break the Crusaders' disciplined formation. The Hospitallers finally lost patience and launched an unauthorized attack. Instead of punishing them, Richard seized the moment, ordering a full countercharge. The result was devastating. The Muslim army retreated, giving Richard control of the coast and earning him admiration even from Saladin's chroniclers. Jerusalem, so close yet forever out of reach. By winter, Richard's army stood within sight of Jerusalem's walls. The city was weak, uncertain, and vulnerable, but the weather turned brutal. Rainstorms, bitter cold, and fears of encirclement forced the Crusaders to retreat. A second attempt was made months later, but division among the Crusader leadership ruined the plan. Richard argued for attacking Egypt first, a strategy Saladin feared, but others insisted on marching straight to Jerusalem. Neither side gave in. With no unity and no clear strategy, the crusade faltered, a truce with honor. Despite setbacks, Richard's brilliance in battle never dimmed. At Jaffa, he won another stunning victory, personally fighting on the front lines. Saladin, exhausted and dealing with his own internal struggles, agreed to negotiate. On September 2, 1192, the Treaty of Jaffa was signed. It allowed Christian pilgrims access to Jerusalem and established a 3-year truce. Jerusalem remained under Muslim control, but the bloodshed finally stopped. Soon after, Richard began his journey home. He had no idea a greater danger awaited him, not on the battlefield, but in Europe. The captive king. Disguised as a simple knight, Richard traveled through Europe, hoping to avoid enemies like King Philip II and his treacherous brother John. But near Vienna, he was captured by Leopold V of Austria, whose pride Richard had insulted during the Crusade. Leopold handed him to Emperor Henry VI, who demanded an enormous ransom, 150,000 marks of silver. The sum was so huge it required special taxes, public donations, and the sale of royal lands. Eleanor, now in her late 60s, tirelessly gathered the funds. After 14 months, Richard was released. The last wars of the Lionheart. Back in England, Richard reasserted dominance quickly. He forgave John, secured his kingdom, and returned to France to confront Philip II. In Normandy, he built the mighty fortress of Chateau Gaillard, a masterpiece of medieval military engineering, defying church protests and political agreements. War against Philip raged on. Richard won major victories, strengthened alliances, and forced the French king repeatedly into retreat. But fate intervened. The Lionheart's final battle. In March 1199, Richard besieged a minor castle in Limousin, Château de Chalus-Chabrol, where a small rebellion was underway. During the siege, a crossbowman struck Richard in the shoulder. The wound became infected. Despite every attempt to save him, gangrene spread. On April 6, 1199, Richard the Lionheart died in the arms of his mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine. Europe mourned a legend. Epilogue: Legacy of a Warrior King. Richard ruled England for 10 years but spent only a few months of his reign on English soil. Yet he became one of England's most iconic kings. He was not a peaceful ruler, he was not an efficient administrator, but he was a leader who inspired loyalty, fear, and admiration. A man whose courage reshaped the Crusades. A king whose name still echoes through history as the very symbol of knightly valor. Richard I lived as he fought, boldly, fiercely, and without compromise. And that is why the world remembers him as the Lionheart. Thank you for watching this incredible journey through the life of Richard the Lionheart, a king who lived for glory, fought for honor, and carved his name into history with fire and steel. If you enjoyed this video and want more powerful stories of legendary rulers, epic wars, and forgotten empires, make sure to hit the like and don't forget to subscribe.